Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where when you hear this sound, it's the rustling of a small hair follicle on the head of a Lovecraftian Cthulhu at the bottom of the Antarctic ice circle, just whispering out my way into nothingness. That means we were in the post-tech edition, it's a post-tech decade of the bathtub. We don't do any high-tech, no tech, no tech, no low tech, just no tech. We're filming this on an old 8mm camera and a reel-to-reel tape deck I inherited from my grandfather. So that's it. We're not going to do any super tech. It's just me, just Dodo, just the books, just the bathtub. Pure, all suds, no pixels. That's our new motto. All suds, no pixels. We're gonna finish up. We actually are going to finish a project. Normally we just start projects with the bathtub. We come up with all sorts of different ideas and we just start doing them. That's Dodo's. And we start all these crazy ideas and then we never finish them. Like, we're going to read through all of Cormac McCarthy, or we're going to read a whole year of Avram Davidson's editorship of F and SF. But we actually finished reading basically the complete Lovecraft over the past few years. This is the third volume. I finally finished it. I read it over several months, really off and on. The Dreams in the Witch House. It's one of the three really mighty fine volumes edited by one of our heroes here at the bathtub. I don't know, a bathtub wouldn't be the same without him. S.T. Joshi, who edited these three excellent volumes many years ago, but I would say this is the preferred medium for reading Lovecraft. And I'm not a Lovecraft expert. I never really read him or took him seriously until about 3 or 4 years ago. And now I enjoy him. I enjoy him a lot. We'll talk a little bit about this third volume in a minute. But it's much better than there's so many different editions. I had so many editions of Lovecraft, including Joshi's own, the annotated Lovecraft and all that, and some of these little Beagle copies, especially the ones edited by what's his name? August Derleth. We're going to talk a little bit about August Derleth in a minute. And they're really kind of cool old paperbacks, but you don't need them. They're not useless. This is it. Those 3 volumes have all his stories that he wrote, and none of the ones that August Derleth are kind of cobbled together. And then he would take fragments of old Lovecraft manuscripts, and then he would write thousands and thousands of words and created some, what Joshi says are terrible stories. It sounds pretty bad. And also, this week I finally am almost finished. I only got like 20 more pages. Joshi's excellent I Am Providence. Academic biography should be this good. Academically published biography by academic presses. Really, really, it's a long volume. As usually, we're half information on the show and half misinformation because it's just what I remember. As I recall, the longest version of it is on Kindle. It's a very long biography anyway, and I read the whole Kindle biography and just really, really enjoyed it. I picked it up off and on over a few years. He does a lot with the Friends of Lovecraft and the publications, and the last 20, 30 pages so far, I'm just finishing it off, is basically about how Lovecraft was recovered by publishers such as, August Derleth as an editor, as a publisher, was a very important publisher. According to Joshi, he was not important as an editor in some ways. I just bought these really cheap, surprisingly cheap. I paid less than $100 for both of them. These were not the first editions or the first appearances of the Arkham House H.P. Lovecrafts. This is Dunwich Horror and Other Stories, Dagon, published in the early 60s, I believe. This one was reviewed in F and SF we just read. And this is basically the complete Lovecraft that he wrote before all the kind of fragments started coming out of everybody's ears. And they're beautiful volumes, beautiful looking books, very important about kind of presenting his works legibly, because I guess the early first editions of Lovecraft were pretty hard to read. They were really cheaply produced. Anyway, beautiful books. I'm so excited about having those. They're just kind of cool books. So, okay, that's that. The Joshi biography is just terrific. Even if you don't have any interest in Lovecraft as a writer, he's a fascinating guy, and I like him quite a bit because he's always known by these horrible pictures. Because the pictures, every time you see his picture, you think, oh my God, he was crazy, and he was not that crazy. He was actually a perfectly loving. Sounds like in some ways a lovingly guy, in some ways a horrible guy, like most of us, and had lots of friends and was a kind of interesting person who wrote thousands and thousands of letters. He seemed to be writing letters all the time. Anyway, this is the third volume. I've read, and I enjoyed most of it. I forget stories so quickly. It's not my favorite of the 3 volumes. That's all I can say. It's not my favorite. Most of my favorite stories were in the first 2 volumes. It has a number of short stories in here, which I liked most of the stuff I read in this. There's a lot of early stories, and then some things like The Shunned House, which is interesting. A story called The Horror at Red Hook. Joshi does really good little intros and little background informations in really, really beautifully annotated volumes. I don't think you need to get the annotated Lovecraft. That's why I got rid of that finally. It's just there's so much notes and so much of interest just in these nice little handsome volumes. Which the story I was about to talk about was A Horror at Red Hook, which sort of dramatizes Lovecraft's fear of basically anyone who's not white. It's the notion of the cities and the racist quality of some of Lovecraft's imagination comes out quite clearly in that story, which is still kind of I find an interesting horror story. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe's The Man in the Crowd, or some of those other the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, where the heart of the earth is filled with black people who might come kill you. So the racist part comes out of that story. But in the rest of the stories, you don't really see it as much. It has these 2 long narrative fantasies. The Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadeth. Actually, I have that cool volume. I won't dig it out. I have in the old Ballantine editions, which was not published in his lifetime, and which now has a lot of... It was interesting. It was actually quite well written, and it wasn't quite what I wanted to read from Lovecraft. And other than that, it was okay. I quite liked the Dreams of the Witch House, Dreams in the Witch House, which is a very interesting Lovecraft story, and it was a little unusual for him, which is that it was about a guy again, it's kind of recovered from old manuscripts, the story of a young man who lives in a house which is designed by witches that allows you to sort of understand mathematical journeys through space and time, or something like that. I forget now, but it was a really good story. And finally, there's a story in here which Joshi lists among the top stories by some of the better stories of Lovecraft. The Shadow Out of Time, the last good story Lovecraft wrote before he died, much too young. And I liked it, but it was basically like a pale imitation of Mountains of Madness, which is a kind of brilliant story, which I never appreciated until I turned to an old man. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much more. There's so much of interest in this that I enjoyed from this volume. I'll definitely keep these and read these over again, and I will keep these editions, and I'll probably force myself to keep as much as I have to keep these. These are just too beautiful. But one of the things I would close on was that it's Joshi's argument in this magisterial, as they like to say, biography, just an amazing piece of work and scholarship, and love and devotion to a writer, is that I did not know this, but August Derleth, who I knew of as writing those Solar Ponds, he wrote Solar Ponds books, and he wrote some really interesting literary fiction when he was a young man. He wrote a lot of work, and he was also the man who basically started Arkham House with Donald Wandry. He according to Joshi, he really just totally created this whole, what do you call it, the Cthulhu mythos. And he been again rewriting these stories and trying to codify it into like a history of these creatures from outer space. I forget that most of Lovecraft's stuff are creatures, super genius creatures that look horrific from other planets coming here and basically just treating us like bugs on a plate. And he created this mythos. And the Tales of Cthulhu mythos, which I actually have in my own Beagle editions, and they're supposed to be terrible, and they're supposed to be very badly written. And according to Joshi, many people read that rubbish and attribute it to Lovecraft unfairly. So that's a little thing to look out for. That's why it's good if you stick with those 3 Penguin volumes, pick up those old volumes. Some of them may be still in print. Then you really get all the main material by Lovecraft, and you'll have a great read. It's really a great time. He writes, all of his stuff kind of creates a world that is completely its own place. Whether you're reading Cormac McCarthy, or you're reading Steinbeck, or you're reading a Jean Rhys novel, a great writer just kind of creates his own place when you're in it. Your own bathtub, sorry for the metaphor, to wear the metaphor out. And the language and the way Lovecraft creates these kind of streams of language and experience of these kind of horrible events. They're not horrible. They're actually quite beautifully written, and they're kind of beautiful, spacious places to relax and be entranced by. It's more entrancing than horrifying. They're not really. Most of them are not horror stories. Okay. Again, I'm a Lovecraft fan. I like Clark Ashton Smith even more. Thanks to all the people who kept him alive over the years. Well, idiots like me kept making fun of him. And again, S.T. Joshi's, get the Kindle edition if you want to, because it's a big damn book, and you really enjoy it. It's a great read. Dodo, do you have anything? You want to say anything, Dodo? 3,000 subscribers. It's us, 3,000 subscribers, or the climate apocalypse. One of them has to win, and we're hoping it's us. Okay, bye.